pregnant woman in labor. Nurses speechless when 12 babies are born. What does this mean for her health? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The hospital room buzzed with a flurry of activity. Nurses shuffled from one end to another, whispering frantically, while doctors stood poised at the edge of chaos. The air was thick with tension as Amanda Hayes, a 32-year-old mother, clung to the bed rails, her face pale and glistening with sweat. The labor pains were coming fast and hard, sharper and more relentless than she had ever experienced before. "Stay with us, Amanda," urged Dr. Patel, the lead obstetrician, his calm voice betraying the gravity of the situation. "We need you to keep breathing deeply. You're doing great, but we've got a long way to go." Amanda nodded weakly, her knuckles white as she gripped her husband David's hand. He knelt beside her, his own face ashen with worry. Despite his stoic demeanor, his trembling hand betrayed his fear. They had known this pregnancy would be difficult. Amanda's first ultrasound at 8 weeks had shown signs of a possible anomaly, and by the 20th week, the truth was undeniable. She was carrying 12 babies. The news had been both miraculous and terrifying. While multiple births weren't unheard of, a case of this magnitude had placed Amanda in uncharted medical territory. Specialists from across the state had been consulted, and for the past 3 months, she'd been under constant surveillance at St. Mary's Medical Center. The risk to her health and to the babies had been discussed endlessly, but no one had truly been prepared for what lay ahead. Now, at 31 weeks gestation, Amanda was in premature labor. She could feel the raw energy of her body pushing beyond its limits, as though every fiber of her being was stretched to the brink. "I feel like I'm tearing apart," she screamed, her voice cracking. Dr. Patel exchanged a glance with one of the nurses. "We're moving into critical territory. Page NICU and prep for emergency resuscitation for all units. And keep an eye on her vitals. Her blood pressure is spiking." Amanda's vision blurred as a wave of dizziness washed over her. She could hear the distant hum of monitors, the incessant beeping that signaled her body's rebellion. The eclampsia they'd been monitoring was progressing rapidly, and now her kidneys were showing signs of strain. I can't do this," Amanda whispered, her head lolling back. David leaned closer, his voice breaking. "You're the strongest woman I know, Amanda. You can do this. Stay with me. Stay with us." Her heart thudded erratically in her chest as the first cry pierced the room, a high, wailing sound that cut through the chaos like a lifeline. "It's a boy," announced one of the nurses, her hands moving deftly as she cleaned and swaddled the tiny infant before handing him off to another team member. But there was no time for celebration. The contractions surged again, and Amanda's body convulsed as the second baby entered the world, followed by the third. Each delivery was a miracle and a struggle, as Amanda teetered on the edge of consciousness. "Her blood pressure is dropping dangerously low. We're losing her." The words floated around her like fragments of a bad dream. Amanda could feel herself slipping, the warmth of David's hand anchoring her to reality. "Fight, Amanda!" David cried, tears streaming down his face. "Don't you dare give up on me. On them!" The fourth baby was delivered in a rush of fluids, and then the fifth. Amanda's breathing grew shallow, her lips tinged blue as the medical team worked frantically to stabilize her. "She's hemorrhaging!" shouted Dr. Patel. "We need blood transfusions, stat! Get me the crash cart!" Amanda drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind a foggy haze. Memories of her life flashed before her childhood, her wedding day, the moment she'd seen the first flicker of life on an ultrasound screen. She wasn't ready to leave, but her body was failing her. The room exploded into action as the sixth baby emerged, then the seventh. Each new life was rushed to waiting hands, their fragile forms barely clinging to survival. The sound of machines and hurried voices blurred together, a cacophony of urgency. "Her heart rate is unstable." "We're on the 9th baby now," a nurse reported, her voice strained with disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this." As the final 3 babies were delivered, Amanda's body went limp, her heart struggling to keep pace. The room fell silent for a split second before the shrill wail of alarms filled the air. "She's coding!" David was pulled away as the medical team surrounded Amanda, working tirelessly to revive her. His heart pounded in his chest, a deafening rhythm of despair. He could see the tiny, wriggling forms of his children being wheeled away to the NICU, but his focus remained on Amanda. "Come back to me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, Amanda, come back." The team worked with relentless determination, their hands moving in a synchronized dance of life-saving measures. After what felt like an eternity, the heart monitor beeped faintly, signaling the return of a fragile heartbeat. "She's back." David collapsed into the chair, his body shaking with relief. But the relief was short-lived. Amanda's condition remained critical, her body ravaged by the strain of the delivery. As she was wheeled into the ICU, David followed closely, his mind racing with fear and questions. How would she recover from this? What would happen to their 12 newborns, each fighting their own battle for survival? The miracle of life had come at an unimaginable cost, and Amanda's journey was far from over. The dim glow of fluorescent lights filled the ICU as Amanda lay motionless, her fragile body connected to a web of tubes and monitors. Machines beeped steadily, keeping her tethered to life, while David sat vigil at her side, his head resting in his hands. Every so often he would glance at her pale face, willing her to wake up, to smile, to reassure him that she was still there. The weight of the past hours pressed heavily on him. The babies, 12 of them, were now in the NICU, each one smaller than he had imagined, their tiny bodies enclosed in temperature-controlled incubators. The neonatologist had been blunt. The odds of survival were slim for some. Premature by 9 weeks, their organs were underdeveloped, and each one faced unique challenges. Yet it was Amanda's condition that haunted David the most. Dr. Patel entered quietly, his expression a mix of exhaustion and resolve. David stood immediately, searching the doctor's face for any sign of hope. "She made it through the surgery," Dr. Patel began. "We managed to stop the bleeding, but her recovery will be complicated. Her kidneys are severely damaged from the strain. We've started dialysis and her liver function is borderline. She's stable for now, but..." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She's not out of the woods." David's throat tightened. "And the babies?" Dr. Patel nodded. "The NICU team is doing everything they can. Right now, all 12 are holding on, but it's a delicate balance. Each one has unique risks, from underdeveloped lungs to low birth weight. We'll be monitoring them around the clock." David sank back into the chair, his mind reeling. He couldn't fathom losing any of them, not Amanda, not the babies. This wasn't how their miracle was supposed to unfold. 2 days later, Amanda opened her eyes. Her vision was blurry, and for a moment, she struggled to understand where she was. The sterile scent of the ICU brought fragments of memory rushing back, the delivery, the pain, the panic. Her lips moved, dry and cracked, as she whispered, "David, the babies." David, who had been dozing in the chair, jolted awake at the sound of her voice. "Amanda," he gasped, leaning forward to take her hand. Tears welled in his eyes as he saw her looking at him, her gaze weak but lucid. "The babies," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "They're in the NICU," he said, his voice trembling. "They're fighters, just like you. But you need to rest, Amanda. You've been through so much." Amanda's chest rose and fell unevenly as she processed his words. "I want to see them," she murmured. David hesitated, glancing at the monitors and the IVs attached to her. "You're not strong enough yet. The doctor said..." "Please," she interrupted, her voice cracking with desperation. "I need to see them." It took another day of stabilization before Amanda was allowed to visit the NICU. Wheelchair-bound and pale, she was wheeled into the sterile, softly lit room where 12 incubators lined the walls. Each one held a tiny, fragile life, their bodies no larger than the palm of a hand. Amanda's breath hitched as she leaned closer to the first incubator. Inside was a boy, Baby A, as the nurses had labeled him, his skin translucent, his chest rising and falling with the help of a ventilator. Her heart ached with a mixture of love and fear as she placed a trembling hand on the glass. "They're beautiful," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They're fighters," David echoed, standing beside her. The days turned into weeks, and the challenges mounted. Baby F developed a life-threatening infection, prompting emergency intervention. Baby K struggled to breathe on his own, while Baby C required surgery to repair a hole in his heart. Each setback was a blow, and Amanda, still recovering from her own ordeal, felt the weight of every struggle as though it were her own. Her health remained precarious. Dialysis sessions left her drained, and her body was slow to heal. Nurses often found her crying silently in her room, the stress of her condition and the baby's battles overwhelming her. Yet, in those moments, Amanda found strength in small victories. A tiny hand gripping her finger, the first time Baby B opened her eyes, the steady gain of an ounce in weight for Baby H. One evening, as Amanda sat in her hospital bed, flipping through the photos David had taken of the babies, Dr. Patel entered with a grave expression. Amanda felt her stomach knot. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk about your kidneys," he said. "Your function hasn't improved and dialysis is no longer enough. You'll need a transplant." The words hit Amanda like a freight train. A transplant? After everything else? How much more could her body endure? David, seated beside her, immediately reached for her hand. "Then we'll find a donor," he said firmly. "We'll do whatever it takes." Amanda looked at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and despair. "What if I don't make it, David? What happens to the babies if I—" "Don't say that," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "You're going to make it. You have to." The weeks stretched on, filled with an endless cycle of hope and heartbreak. 3 of the babies were finally strong enough to leave their incubators, a milestone that brought Amanda and David to tears. Yet others continued to struggle, their fates uncertain. Amanda's condition remained a shadow over everything, the transplant looming as her only chance at survival. Despite the complications, Amanda clung to one unshakable truth. She had brought 12 lives into the world. No matter the odds, she would fight to be there for them. Days turned into nights in an endless blur of waiting, praying, and fighting. Amanda's body continued to betray her, each dialysis session leaving her weaker than before. Her skin had taken on a yellowish hue, a telltale sign of her liver's struggle, and the once simple act of sitting up in bed now required the help of nurses and David. Despite her fragile state, Amanda refused to stay away from the NICU. Every visit drained her energy, but the sight of her babies gave her a reason to keep fighting. The NICU was a world of its own, a place where miracles and heartbreak lived side by side. Amanda and David had gotten to know the nurses and doctors well, forming bonds over shared moments of fear and joy. They celebrated when Baby J managed to breathe without a ventilator for the first time, and they wept together when Baby F suffered a setback with an intestinal condition that required emergency surgery. Amanda's heart ached every time she saw the wires and tubes that seemed to swallow her children's tiny forms, but she reminded herself they were alive. Each one was alive. One evening, as Amanda rested in her hospital bed, David came in with a small, nervous smile on his face. His hands were behind his back, and Amanda immediately knew he was hiding something. "What is it?" she asked, her voice hoarse but tinged with curiosity. David revealed a small, framed photo. It was the first group shot of their babies, lined up in their incubators with their names, Baby A through Baby L, marked in colorful cards beneath them. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the outline of the frame with her fingers. "I thought you'd want something to keep with you when you can't be in the NICU," David said, his voice thick with emotion. Amanda clutched the photo to her chest. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." The joy of that moment, however, was fleeting. Just as David sat beside her, Dr. Patel entered, his expression grim. Amanda felt her stomach twist. "I have some updates," Dr. Patel began. "We've found a potential kidney donor match for you, Amanda. It's a close relative, so the odds are in your favor." Amanda's eyes widened. "A relative?" she asked, her mind racing. David cleared his throat, his gaze dropping. "It's me." Amanda's jaw fell open. David, no. You can't. What if something happens to you? The babies need you. And they need you, David replied, his voice steady but filled with conviction. We don't have time to wait for another donor. Your condition is worsening every day, Amanda. I'm not losing you. Her hands trembled as she tried to process his words. She wanted to argue, to refuse, but deep down, she knew he was right. Without the transplant, her chances of surviving the next few months were slim. And what kind of mother could she be if she wasn't alive to see her children grow? The days leading up to the transplant were some of the hardest Amanda and David had faced. The baby's conditions remained precarious, with baby H developing a heart murmur and baby D struggling to gain weight. Amanda and David spent every possible moment in the NICU, whispering words of encouragement to their little fighters and praying for their strength. On the morning of the surgery, Amanda was wheeled into the operating room, her heart pounding in her chest. She caught one last glimpse of David as he was prepped for his own procedure, his reassuring smile giving her the courage she so desperately needed. "I'll see you on the other side," he said softly. Hours passed as the transplant team worked meticulously. Amanda drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind a haze of anxiety and hope. When she finally woke, groggy and disoriented, she was met with the smiling face of Dr. Patel. "It was a success," he said. "The new kidney is functioning well, and your body is already showing signs of improvement." Tears streamed down Amanda's cheeks. Relief flooded her, but her first thought was of David. "And my husband?" she asked weakly. "He's doing fine," Dr. Patel assured her. "He's in recovery now and asking for you." It took another day before Amanda and David were reunited. She was wheeled into his room, her heart swelling with gratitude as she saw him propped up in bed, a tired but triumphant smile on his face. "You're stuck with me now," he joked, his voice raspy. Amanda laughed, though it quickly turned into a sob. "You saved my life, David. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You already have," he said, his gaze soft. "Every time I see our babies, I know it was worth it." Recovery was slow and arduous for both Amanda and David, but they faced it together. As the weeks turned into months, the babies began to grow stronger, one by one reaching milestones that once seemed impossible. Baby C's heart surgery was a success, and Baby F's infection cleared with aggressive treatment. By the time Amanda was discharged from the hospital, 5 of the babies were healthy enough to come home. Bringing their children into the nursery they had once doubted would ever be filled was a surreal moment for Amanda and David. Cribs lined the walls, each decorated with a colorful nameplate. Amanda cradled baby B in her arms, her heart overflowing with love as she watched David carefully place baby E in her crib. "We're going to need a bigger house," Amanda joked, though her voice wavered with emotion. David chuckled, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "One step at a time," he said. "We've already beaten the odds. The rest will fall into place." Amanda looked around the room, her gaze settling on the 5 tiny faces that had brought her back to life. She knew their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more tears, and more moments of doubt. But for now, they had hope, and that was enough. The house was alive with the soft hums and tiny cries of newborns, a symphony of life that Amanda and David had dreamed of, but never imagined would be this overwhelming. With 5 of the babies now home, every moment was a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and attempts to keep track of which baby needed what. Each child had their own schedule, their own quirks, and their own special needs, making the days both exhausting and rewarding. Amanda sat in the nursery, gently rocking baby B in her arms. Her little girl was the most vocal of the bunch, with a cry that could pierce through any amount of noise. Amanda couldn't help but smile as the tiny bundle yawned, her small fist curling against Amanda's chest. "She's going to be the loud one," Amanda said, glancing over at David, who was struggling to coax baby E into taking a bottle. "I don't know if I'd call it loud," David replied, chuckling. "I think she's got leadership potential. She's already making sure everyone knows what she wants." Amanda laughed softly, but the sound was interrupted by the unmistakable wail of another baby. She turned her head to see baby C kicking his tiny legs in his crib, his face scrunched in protest. Before she could rise, David stood. "I've got him. You stay with her," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. Moments like this had become their new normal. With so many little ones to care for, Amanda and David had fallen into a rhythm that was equal parts teamwork and improvisation. Their days began before the sun rose, with bottles to prepare, laundry to fold, and tiny outfits to change. The nursery had become the heart of their home, filled with cribs, rocking chairs, and a mountain of diapers that seemed to replenish itself as quickly as it disappeared. Even with 5 babies at home, Amanda's thoughts often drifted to the NICU, where the remaining 7 continued their fight. She had spent hours on the phone with the nurses, asking for updates on their progress. Baby F, the smallest of the 12, was making slow but steady improvements, while Baby J had recently been taken off oxygen support, a major milestone. Amanda and David visited the NICU as often as they could, taking turns holding their children and whispering words of encouragement. One afternoon, as Amanda sat with Baby H in the NICU, stroking his soft, wispy hair, a nurse approached with a clipboard. "I have some great news," the nurse said, her face lighting up. "Baby G is ready to come home." Amanda's heart swelled with joy. "Really? He's strong enough?" "He's doing wonderfully," the nurse replied. "He's gained enough weight, and his breathing has stabilized. He's ready to be with his siblings." When Amanda shared the news with David later that evening, they both cried tears of relief. Bringing another baby home felt like a victory, a sign that their family was growing stronger. The next day, they bundled Baby G into a car seat and brought him home to meet his brothers and sisters. The introduction was chaotic but heartwarming. Baby B let out her signature cry as if announcing the arrival, while Baby E stared curiously at the new addition. Amanda placed Baby G in a bassinet beside his siblings, marveling at how small and perfect he was. "Can you believe this?" Amanda whispered to David. "We've got 6 babies under one roof." David shook his head, smiling. "No, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." As the weeks went on, the house became a revolving door of visitors. Friends, family, and even neighbors stopped by to help with feedings, hold the babies, or simply marvel at the Hayes miracle. Amanda's mother, a retired nurse, moved in temporarily to lend a hand, her expertise proving invaluable as Amanda and David navigated the logistics of caring for so many newborns. "Don't forget to burp her after every ounce," Amanda's mother said, passing Baby C to Amanda. "And keep an eye on Baby E. He's starting to show signs of colic." Despite the challenges, the house was filled with love and laughter. Amanda often found herself gazing at her children, marveling at how each one had their own unique personality. Baby H was the quiet observer, always watching the world around him with wide, curious eyes. Baby B was the loudest, while Baby G had a calm, almost serene demeanor. Baby C was the most active, constantly kicking his legs and flailing his tiny arms as if eager to explore the world. Late one night, as the rest of the house slept, Amanda sat in the nursery, holding Baby B against her chest. The soft glow of a nightlight illuminated the room, casting a warm, comforting light. Amanda rocked gently, humming a lullaby as Baby B's breathing slowed, her tiny hand clutching Amanda's shirt. In that quiet moment, Amanda felt the weight of everything they had been through. The months of fear, the endless hospital stays, the surgeries, and the uncertainty. But she also felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Against all odds, her family was growing, thriving, and healing. David appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "You should be sleeping," he said, though his tone was gentle. Amanda smiled at him. "I couldn't resist. Look at her." David walked over and kissed the top of Amanda's head. "They're amazing," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Every single one of them." As they stood together, watching their sleeping babies, Amanda knew their journey was far from over. There were still battles to be fought and milestones to reach, but for now, she allowed herself to savor the peace of the moment. Her family was together, and that was all that mattered. The days turned into a blur of activity as Amanda and David adjusted to life with 6 babies at home. The nursery was a hive of motion, and every surface seemed to hold a pacifier, bottle, or blanket. Amanda had become a master of multitasking, feeding 2 babies at once while using her foot to rock a bassinet with a fussy third. David, who had never been particularly handy, was now an expert at assembling cribs, swings, and baby monitors, his evenings spent reading parenting guides or learning how to soothe colicky cries. Each baby was developing their own personality, and Amanda couldn't help but marvel at how different they all were, despite sharing the same womb. Baby G, the most recent addition to the household, was proving to be the peacemaker. He rarely cried, often watching his siblings with a calm curiosity that Amanda found soothing amidst the chaos. Baby B, true to form, was the loudest, demanding attention with a voice that seemed far too powerful for her tiny body. Baby E had a mischievous streak, flashing toothless grins at the oddest times, while Baby C was the explorer, wriggling and kicking as if eager to crawl before he was even close to ready. The couple kept a careful schedule, recording each feeding and diaper change on a whiteboard in the kitchen. Friends and family continued to drop by to help, but Amanda and David had quickly learned that raising 6 infants was a round-the-clock job that required patience, stamina, and a sense of humor. One evening, after the babies had finally settled down for the night, Amanda and David collapsed onto the couch. The house was quiet for the first time in hours, and the sheer luxury of silence made them both sigh with relief. "We survived another day," David joked, leaning his head back and closing his eyes. "Barely," Amanda replied, though she was smiling. She reached over and rested her hand on his. "Can you believe this is our life now?" David opened one eye and looked at her. "I believe it every time I step on a toy or get spit up on." Amanda laughed, covering her mouth to keep from waking the babies. "You're not wrong, but it's worth it, isn't it?" David sat up, his expression softening. Every second. Their moment of peace was short-lived. A cry pierced the quiet, and both parents groaned simultaneously. "I'll go," Amanda said, pushing herself up from the couch. "No, you stay," David insisted. "I've got this one." Amanda watched him disappear into the nursery and leaned back against the cushions, exhaustion tugging at her. But before she could close her eyes, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She picked it up and saw a message from the NICU. Update. Baby J and Baby L are ready to come home. Discharge scheduled for tomorrow. Her heart leapt. 2 more babies strong enough to leave the hospital. She quickly called David back into the room and shared the news. "That's amazing," he said, grinning. "We'll need to set up 2 more cribs." "And rearrange the nursery," Amanda added, already making a mental list of what needed to be done. The next day, Amanda and David made the familiar drive to the hospital, their hearts brimming with excitement. Baby J and Baby L had always been among the more fragile of the 12, and seeing them reach this milestone felt like a major victory. The nurses who had cared for them since birth were equally emotional, offering hugs and tearful goodbyes as Amanda and David carefully placed the twins in their car seats. When they arrived home, the reaction was immediate. Baby B greeted her new siblings with a series of wails, as if protesting the additional competition for attention. Baby C kicked excitedly in his crib, while Baby G watched quietly from his bassinet. Amanda couldn't help but laugh as she carried Baby J into the nursery. "They're already making an impression," she said, placing the baby down gently. David looked around at the room, now filled with 8 cribs and an ever-growing collection of toys and baby supplies. "This place looks like a daycare center." "It is a daycare center," Amanda teased, kissing him on the cheek. "But it's ours." As the weeks passed, Amanda and David settled into a new rhythm. With 8 babies at home, their days were more demanding than ever. But they found joy in the small moments. Baby E's first giggle, Baby L rolling over, Baby G clutching Amanda's finger with surprising strength. Each milestone felt like a triumph, a reminder of how far their family had come. The NICU remained a part of their lives, and Amanda and David visited regularly to see the remaining 4 babies. Baby F, the smallest of the group, continued to fight against all odds. Baby K, who had struggled with breathing issues, was now gaining weight steadily. Amanda's heart ached every time she left the hospital, knowing her family wouldn't be complete until all 12 were under one roof. One afternoon, as Amanda rocked baby H to sleep, David walked into the nursery with his phone in hand. His expression was one of disbelief and excitement. "You won't believe this," he said, handing her the phone. "We're in the news." Amanda looked at the screen and saw an article about their family, complete with photos of the babies and quotes from their doctors. The headline read, "Miracle Multiples. Family welcomes 12 babies, defies all odds." Her cheeks flushed as she read through the story, which detailed their journey and the incredible survival of their children. "I don't know how I feel about this," she admitted, though she couldn't stop smiling. David sat beside her. "It's a little strange, but maybe it's good. People need stories like this, something to believe in." Amanda nodded, her gaze drifting to the cribs around her. She thought about everything they had endured to get to this moment, and a wave of gratitude washed over her. "There are miracles," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Every single one of them." David wrapped his arm around her, and together they watched their children sleep, their hearts full, and their home bustling with life. The Hayes household was now a bustling haven for 8 tiny, lively miracles, and yet, it still felt incomplete. Amanda and David cherished every moment with their babies at home, but longed for the day when all 12 would be under one roof. The NICU updates had become the highlight of Amanda's day, each call bringing news of progress, setbacks, or milestones for the 4 remaining little fighters. One morning, Amanda's phone buzzed just as she was finishing a bottle for baby G. She answered eagerly, balancing the bottle in one hand while cradling her son with the other. "Mrs. Hayes?" came the familiar voice of one of the NICU nurses. "I've got some wonderful news. Baby F and baby K are ready to be discharged." Amanda froze, her heart leaping with joy. Baby F, the tiniest of the 12, had faced the steepest uphill battle of them all. To hear that he was strong enough to leave the hospital felt like an impossible dream. "Both of them?" Amanda asked, her voice cracking. "Yes," the nurse confirmed. "They're doing wonderfully. We've scheduled their discharge for tomorrow morning." Amanda's eyes filled with tears as she hung up the phone and immediately called for David. When she shared the news, he swept her into a hug, careful not to jostle baby G, who stared at his parents with wide, curious eyes. "That's amazing," David said, his voice full of awe. "We're one step closer." The next day, Amanda and David made the now familiar trip to the NICU, their hearts brimming with excitement. Baby F and baby K were bundled in tiny outfits that Amanda had carefully chosen weeks ago, each one no bigger than a doll's clothes. The nurses who had cared for them since birth smiled warmly as they handed the babies over, their faces glowing with pride. "Take good care of them," one nurse said, her voice thick with emotion. "They're special, those 2. "They all are," Amanda replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. Bringing baby F and baby K home was a surreal experience. Amanda had spent so many sleepless nights worrying about them, and now, as she placed them in their cribs, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. The nursery, now holding 10 cribs, felt fuller than ever. The introduction to their siblings was as chaotic as Amanda had expected. Baby B let out her signature wail, demanding immediate attention, while baby C kicked his legs in excitement. Baby H watched with wide eyes, as if trying to process the growing crowd around him. Amanda laughed as David stood in the middle of the room, holding baby K in one arm and attempting to soothe baby E with the other. "Welcome to the circus," Amanda joked, her heart swelling with love. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Feeding 10 babies was a full-time job, and Amanda and David often found themselves collapsing into bed at night, utterly exhausted but profoundly happy. Their house was filled with the sounds of coos, cries, and laughter, a symphony of life that reminded them daily of how far they had come. One evening, as Amanda sat in the nursery, rocking baby F in her arms, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. His tiny hand reached out, gripping her finger with surprising strength. Tears filled her eyes as she realized how far he had come, from the fragile, barely there baby she had first met in the NICU. "You're a fighter," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "Just like your brothers and sisters." David walked in, carrying baby Jay, who had been particularly fussy that evening. He smiled when he saw Amanda with baby F. "He's thriving," David said, sitting beside her. "They all are." Amanda nodded, her gaze drifting to the cribs around them. "We're almost there," she said softly. "2 more to go." The final 2 babies, baby A and baby L, remained in the NICU, but their progress was steady. Amanda and David visited as often as they could, spending hours holding them and whispering words of encouragement. Baby A, the firstborn, had been a leader from the start, fighting through lung complications and showing resilience that amazed everyone. Baby L, the quietest of the group, had a calm demeanor that reminded Amanda of David. One morning, Amanda's phone buzzed with the call she had been waiting for. "Mrs. Hayes, we have great news," the nurse said. "Baby A and baby L are ready to come home." Amanda clutched the phone tightly, tears streaming down her face. She called David immediately, and together they made plans to bring their family together at last. The day the final 2 babies came home was one of celebration and chaos. Friends and family gathered to help welcome the newest arrivals, filling the house with laughter and love. Amanda and David stood in the nursery, now overflowing with 12 cribs, and marveled at the sight of their complete family. "We did it," Amanda said, her voice trembling with emotion. "They're all here." David wrapped his arm around her, his gaze fixed on the tiny wriggling forms that filled the room. "They're our miracle," he said. "Every single one of them." That night, as Amanda and David sat in the nursery, surrounded by the soft sounds of their sleeping babies, they allowed themselves a moment to breathe. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but they had made it. Their family was whole, and the future, though uncertain, was bright. "Do you think they'll ever understand how much we went through to get here?" Amanda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David smiled, pulling her close. "Maybe not, but we'll tell them, and we'll remind them every day how loved they are." Amanda nodded, her heart full. "We're ready for this," she said. "All 12 of them." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Amanda and David felt at peace, their hearts and home finally complete. The Hayes household had become a lively, bustling home filled with laughter, curiosity, and a healthy dose of chaos. The 12 little miracles who had once fit in the palms of their parents' hands were now toddlers, each with their own vibrant personality. Amanda and David had learned to navigate the whirlwind of parenthood with humor and patience, but nothing could have fully prepared them for the energy of 12 two-year-olds. The nursery had long since been converted into a sprawling playroom, a colorful space filled with toys, books, and toddler-proof furniture. Cribs had given way to tiny beds, each decorated with personalized sheets and pillows. Above each bed hung a name, carefully chosen by Amanda and David after many sleepless nights and debates. Aiden, the oldest and natural leader of the group. Aiden had a knack for organizing his siblings, often leading them on imaginary adventures around the house. Bella. The loudest of the 12, Bella had a strong will and an even stronger set of lungs, but her hugs could melt hearts. Charlie. The curious explorer, always climbing, touching, and testing the boundaries of what he could do. Delilah. Quiet and thoughtful, Delilah was the observer, often watching her siblings' antics before joining in. Elliot. The joker, Elliot loved to make everyone laugh with his silly faces and antics. Fiona. The smallest but fiercest, Fiona had a determined streak that left no doubt she could handle herself among her siblings. Gracie. The nurturer, Gracie often tried to help Amanda and David with her siblings, offering them hugs and her favorite toys. Henry. The bookworm. Henry could often be found flipping through picture books, his little brow furrowed in concentration. Isla. The artist. Isla loved to draw on anything she could find. Paper, walls, and occasionally her siblings. Jack. The charmer. Jack had a smile that could get him out of any trouble he caused, and he knew it. Lila. The dreamer. Lila often got lost in her own little world, talking to her toys as if they were real. Mason. The daredevil. Mason had no fear, whether it was climbing furniture or chasing the family dog. The morning routine in the Hayes household was nothing short of a marathon. Amanda and David had developed a system that involved assembly line breakfasts, a chore chart, and an endless supply of patience. Despite the chaos, there was a rhythm to their days that made the madness manageable. One sunny Saturday, Amanda stood at the kitchen counter preparing sandwiches for lunch while David supervised the toddlers playing in the backyard. The sound of giggles and the occasional squeal floated through the open window, filling the house with warmth. "Mama!" Bella burst through the back door, her curls bouncing as she ran toward Amanda. "Aiden says I can't have the blue ball." Amanda smiled, wiping her hands on a towel and crouching to Bella's level. "Did you ask him nicely?" she asked. Bella nodded vigorously. "I said, please, but he said no." "Let's go talk to him together," Amanda said, taking Bella's hand and leading her outside. The backyard was a toddler wonderland, complete with a sandbox, a mini slide, and a colorful playhouse. Aiden was standing proudly beside the blue ball, his arms crossed. "Aiden," Amanda said gently, crouching again, "can we share the blue ball with Bella for a little while?" Aiden hesitated, then sighed dramatically. "Okay, but she can't take it forever." Bella beamed, grabbing the ball and running off. Amanda kissed the top of Aiden's head. "Thank you for being such a good big brother." David walked over, a toddler hanging off each arm. "Refereeing again?" he asked, grinning. "Always," Amanda replied with a laugh. Later that evening, after the chaos of bath time and bedtime stories, Amanda and David sat together on the couch, exhausted but content. The house was finally quiet, save for the occasional murmur from one of the baby monitors. "Can you believe it's been 2 years?" Amanda asked, leaning her head on David's shoulder. David shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. "Sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday we were in the NICU. Other times, it feels like a lifetime ago." Amanda nodded. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" David turned to her, his eyes full of love. "We have, and look at them now, thriving, happy, and driving us absolutely crazy." Amanda laughed, her heart full. "I wouldn't trade it for anything." As they sat there, watching the flicker of the baby monitors and listening to the gentle hum of their home, Amanda realized how far they had come. The challenges they had faced were immense, but so was the love that had carried them through. Their family was chaotic, loud, and messy, but it was perfect. And as Amanda drifted off to sleep that night, her heart was at peace, knowing that the 12 little lives she and David had fought so hard to protect were now the center of a bright, beautiful future.